The Blast from Our Past Network.
Welcome to our exclusive interview series for Podcasting After Dark with your hosts, Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer. Tonight's interview is with the cast and crew of Bampire.
Well, here we are. This is really special for everybody listening because we are not your typically on Podcasting After Dark, we cover 70s, 80s, sometimes 90s horror and sci-fi and cult movies. But today, this is special. We are talking about an indie project that got fully funded on Indiegogo, so congrats to everybody involved. And B, it's a local hometown vibe, not hometown for Corey, but a local vibe for Corey, being in Eugene, Oregon. But we are here with cast and crew from the movie Bampire.
How's it going, guys?
Hello. Thank you so much for bringing us on.
Yeah.
This is our pleasure.
I can't wait to talk to all you guys about the project, but I'm just going to go kind of introduce everybody one by one. And then so everyone listening can go, oh, that's the voice connected to the name. So when I call it, this is my teacher voice now. When I call out your name, just, give us a shout. So Emily, what's your last name, by the way?
My last name is Morden, but I go by Emily Claire.
Okay, cool.
And I am a producer on Bampire.
Nice to meet you, Emily. Welcome to the show. And Zoe Wassman, can you please introduce yourself to everybody?
Hey guys, I'm Zoe Wassman. I'm one of the writers of Bampire. And I'm just super honored to be here talking about this project. It's all I think about. So it's always good to get some of that out of my own head and into the world. So I appreciate you guys giving us some airtime.
That's absolutely our pleasure. Malachi Schnell, who's rocking, and you can't see this obviously because you're listening to it, but he's rocking a sweet, what is that, from Lilo and Stitch hoodie. Malachi, can you say hi to everybody?
Hey, everybody. I'm Malachi from Planet Turbo. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. And I love your hoodie. It's very dope. Taylor Morden. Now, right before we jumped on, I was referencing Taylor's amazing kind of cave that he's recording from right now, which looks like, Blockbuster Video meets Hollywood Video meets mom and pop shop. And he dropped the line that he directed the last Blockbuster, which is a documentary, which you guys should all check out as well. I absolutely love that documentary. But Taylor Morden, thank you for joining us on our show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for shedding some light on Bampire here.
So Corey and I we love all things horror, and we went on your Indiegogo page and watched your your reel that you have at the top, and got fully kind of immersed in the world of Bampire. But Zoe, you want to tell everybody what Bampire is about?
Yeah. So Bampire is a 90s creature feature. It's about a community college professor and his students going into the woods to prove the existence of a rare fanged deer species, the musk deer, which actually exists, but just not in the foothills of the Cascades. So they go out into the woods on this quirky little field trip that gets put together kind of last minute, and ultimately run into more than they bargained for.
Are there any particular films that were the inspiration for this? Any particular 90s films?
Specifically for this movie, I do like to reference Who Framed Roger Rabbit as one of our inspirations. Once we entered production, we actually made the decision to use 2D hand-drawn animation in order to really bring our monsters and just animals to life, because they're really prominent in this screenplay. So that's one that I think for a lot of people rings a bell, and ultimately, I think of it as a horror movie because it gave me nightmares. But probably another one I would reference is something like Scream, where you've got this young cast of of really dynamic, authentic feeling characters going on this like would hesitate to call it a mystery, right? But it's definitely a journey of self-discovery, sure, and also the discovery of something horrific. So it's kind of in that same vein of like there's a bit of an intrigue around what's going on, and the primary ensemble is all just like young community college students trying to make their way in the world and figure out
Nice.
where they belong.
And when we met up in at the was it Beerstein in Eugene, and we're talking about the film, my mind went immediately to Evil Tunes, which came out in '92, which has it has animation in it as well. John Carradine's in it, sorry, David Carradine's in it. Check that one out. It's not great. Trust me, it's not great.
We watched that not too long ago. Emily and I watched that as part of our research of how other people had done partly animated horror movies. All of the animation for that is in the trailer and on the cover.
Yeah,
It's like
yes,
a 2-second animated scene. And they're like, it's all about cartoons.
yeah.
Spoiler alert, it's not. We
That
are
was one of
under
the-
5% done with our animation for this project, and we already have more animation than that movie has.
I know, right? It is very sparse. Do you have a
Amazing.
particular like style that you want the animation to be in, or is it like, are you looking to shoot for like that traditional Disney kind of animation style?
Well, fun fact about copyright law, we definitely don't want it to look like Disney animation. But no, that was never something that was really appealing when we started to talk about animation. You know, it's a 90s movie and it's an indie movie and it's a horror movie. So we're referencing things like Ren and Stimpy and Eon Flux and, you know, Liquid Television and stuff like that.
Cool.
It's edgier and I think cooler than if it was just Disney Deer goes crazy.
Yeah.
Malachi, why the 90s?
Well, Zoe and I grew up in the 90s, and so we have this real connection, you know, loose connection or childhood love for the feel and the nostalgia. And then when we met up with Taylor and brought him on as the director and decided to all produce this thing together, Taylor is like a 90s expert. Yeah. So it became such a no-brainer of like, okay, now we know all the specifics too, and we have someone who can really guide us to make sure that the community college feels like an authentic 90s experience, you know, not just us being like, there was definitely flip phones or whatever. It got way more specific. And that was just amazing to really flesh out.
When you said community college in the 90s, which is when I went to community college.
I was gonna say that's when I was in community college.
I remember seeing, you know, bands like Mr. T Experience and Real Big Fish, and I think you dropped a reference to Real Big Fish maybe on your Instagram page. Taylor, are you a 90s music fan?
Yeah, right before the last Blockbuster, I put out a documentary about 90s ska. But I also played in ska bands in the 90s, and I'm friends with Real Big Fish, so we asked them if we could use a Real Big Fish t-shirt on one of our main characters and got permission for that. But yeah, 90s ska, 90s alt rock, that's my jam.
If you guys drop a detachable penis line from King Missile, I will be so floored.
Classic.
Dating myself. Emily, how did you get brought on as a producer?
Well, it was last summer when we were kind of gearing up for production, and you know, this was actually one of the first films that I've been producing on. But I kind of brought a background, you know, from a different field, knowing how to organize information, you know, do spreadsheets, get all the insurance stuff in place. And so I was really happy to join, you know, these three who are like creative geniuses, I have to say. It kind of brings some more of that, the logistics and the other things that need to kind of come together behind the scenes to really make a production run smoothly. So yeah, I was really excited. I also grew up in the 90s, so just getting to work on a film that brings that era of the late 90s to life is really exciting.
Did you guys hit any snags shooting locally around town and everything, or sort of like in the woods around town? Were there any inherent problems from that, or did it go relatively smoothly?
Yeah, there were some challenges.
Everyone had a look on their
Um,
face like, ah.
when you're I will say that when you're working with a micro budget and you're also getting partly donated sets or maybe like a discount on something because you know somebody and that's partly what's making this whole project feasible, a lot of it is like, you know, a handshake and a wink and like oh yeah, you know, you're good to go, no worries. But a lot less of it is really a lot of guarantees about what kind of like service, what kind of experience you're going to have. So ultimately, I will say that the Bampire team really adapted wonderfully whenever these like these hundreds of challenges honestly around our locations would arise. We really handled it like champions, and every single person kind of would step up and problem solve. And you know, that really helped this production team here, because a lot of the time, you know, we wouldn't even hear about some of these problems. They were handled before we got on set, or you know, the moment that we arrived, we had three people briefing us, leading us right to where we needed to go, in order to make the shoot once again go smoothly. So we had a lot of snafus when it came to our locations, but like I said, like with this quality of film that we're doing and the production value that we were going for, we wanted to make sure we were using real sets. We weren't going to go try and build a community college, you know, in a studio. But that meant that we did have to like work with a local college and like make sure that we had all of the paperwork in alignment there. And little things like that can sometimes get shuffled aside when like I said, like when we're making deals with location scouts that are ultimately like able to make those deals with us but maybe don't follow through on their end. So like we've had a couple times like where that was like a pretty big issue, but it definitely like showed me that yeah, I mean, you have to work with other people's favors. You have to sometimes, you know, take something that isn't exactly what you want in order to make something like this happen. And inevitably, you're going to have challenges that arise from that kind of process. But the way that we had such a spirit of teamwork was really the only way that we actually managed to not suffer for those mistakes when they happened. And the project didn't suffer for those mistakes when they happened, which is just such a blessing. Such a
Yeah.
blessing.
We
And I
had, I
assume
would
like,
say,
sorry, go ahead.
we had so many near misses. I just want to throw, like, we were begging security guards to not kick us out, and we had to beg a wedding that had booked the same venue as us. Like, hey guys, I know you're setting up for your wedding tomorrow, but
Oh man.
like we paid for this too. Please leave. It got
Right.
crazy in a few moments, but like Zoe said, we just all came together and found a way to make it work.
And I
Yeah.
imagine you all had to wear multiple caps and everything. Everyone's wearing multiple caps on this production to get things done.
Mostly just hats that say Bampire, but yes, yeah, a lot of Bampire hats. Yeah, one of the great benefits of filming in and around Eugene, Oregon, which is a point of pride for all of us living here, trying to do something at this scale here. One of the great benefits is that, you know, nobody really knows what filming a movie is like. So you ask somebody if we can film there, and they're like, yeah, neat. That's everybody's excited. It's not like LA where everybody's got a form you fill out and a permit you have to get, and you pay this many dollars and you can film there.
Right.
But that's a double-edged sword, because they also don't know what it means. They're like, yeah, sure. And then you show up with 40 people and lights and cameras and dollies and all these things. And they're like, well, this is not at all what we thought we were agreeing to. So, you know, small town filmmaking has its pluses and minuses. And a lot of this was shot in the woods, which you'd think, well, that's the easiest, right? The woods are free. The woods are everywhere.
Right.
But the woods have to have a bathroom. The woods have to have accessibility for vehicles. They have to have
Power supplies.
electricity,
Yeah.
some place to sit down and eat. And it's, you know, the woods aren't as free and easy as maybe we thought at the script stage, when we're like, oh, look at this. It's so easy. 50 pages in the woods. That's free, right? So,
I love
yeah, what
I
you
love
pay for.
I love how Emily's kind of nodding and smiling, but like you said, Emily, behind the scenes, you were doing a lot of things that obviously is like not a glamorous job in the business, but it is probably one of the most vital and important jobs to the business. Were did you feel like, oh, I'm going gray now, this is so stressful for me? Or did you feel like was for this experience for you, was this your first movie you worked on as a producer?
Well, I've been working on documentary,
Okay.
doing producing, but definitely for scripted. And I think there were moments when we all were gray with stress. Because, like Zoe, or I think Malachi, you mentioned there were so many of these like near misses where like there was something that could have just derailed our entire day, our entire week. And like somehow we just squeaked by and we made it work. And it was very stressful. But I mean, I think what I learned is that, there's so much that goes into the planning and there's so much that you can plan for, but there's still going to be things that happen,
Right.
outside of your plan. So you just have to be able to pivot and stay flexible to problem solve. And yeah, the locations, it was kind of like each location we shot at had its unique challenge, we'll say.
That's why you can download these meditation apps and these breathe apps on your phone, because you'd be like, okay, just I can do this. I can do this.
Just breathe.
Got a few of those.
Was the full crew local as well? Like, is everyone pretty much local on this production? To Eugene,
Yes,
that is.
90%, 95% even. I think we had one member of our crew come from out of town for 2 days of filming or so. But for the most part, we actually did totally go Eugene, and we had a really high bar for who we were bringing onto our set, mostly just for ethical reasons. We knew that we were trying to do something really crazy that was going to have a lot of risk to it, and one of the things that we could control was the safety level of the people that we were essentially hiring. So we did bring on a lot of folks that we had actually all personally worked with.
Okay.
So we pulled from a pretty, like a smaller circle than actually what's even available here. Just because we really wanted to make sure that since we were taking so many risks, the safety of the people that we were hiring wasn't one of them.
Okay.
I will say too, there's a couple few notable cast members in your crew for Bampire. One being Diane Franklin, who is a friend of the show and a personal friend as well. She's actually been on our show a few times and has done fundraisers with my other podcast that I run, $2 Late Fee. And she's just a wonderful person. Taylor, can you talk a little bit about working with Diane Franklin?
Yeah, you're 100% right. She's lovely. She's wonderful. She's everything you hope for when you dream of meeting a princess from your childhood.
Or an 80s icon from Terror Vision as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I'm better off dead. She's fantastic. And I've been in touch with her. Like, we weren't friends, but I've known her for a long time. I had tried to cast her in a short film 7 years ago or something like that, that the funding didn't work out. And then tried to put her in the last blockbuster as an 80s icon, as somebody, and that for some reason didn't work out, timing or something like that. So she's sort of been in my contacts for a long time.
Right.
And we had this role in Bampire, and we actually had cast somebody else, or thought we had, and that fell through just a couple weeks before. And because I had Diane's contact, I was like, A, she'd be amazing for this, and B, let's hope she's checking her email today, that sort of thing. And it was just incredible that she read the part, she was up for it, and she was excited to come up to Oregon, because that's the other thing, when you're talking about casting, if you're in California, it's easy to sort of reach out to people and get cameos and people to come in for a day and things like that, when they don't have to like get on a plane and book a hotel and do all this, most of which Emily handles, the hotels and planes. But she was up for it. She did, and she showed up, and we only had her here for a day, and we shot all her scenes back to back, and it couldn't have gone better. She's just she's fantastic.
And
Yeah,
that is
that's
another
awesome.
nice thing about Eugene is, I mean, it's a beautiful town. I've been living here for 5 years now, but I was in LA for about 16 or so. But it's nice how close this is. I think you can do a direct flight from Burbank to Eugene Airport, and it's a nice little extension of Hollywood up here. It's amazing how many productions are happening, and other celebrities actually live up here. Famously, Bruce Campbell. We all know that. Well, I think he's in Bend, outside of Bend area, right? But it's a nice area, and are we seeing the beginnings of like a horror, industry kind of rising in Eugene at this point with Bampire?
I mean, ultimately, yeah. Like I know Taylor and I are actually on the board of a local nonprofit that's looking to bring in more resources for
Oh,
independent
cool.
filmmakers. So not only are we like very active members of that community, but personally, I know that, and I think I can really speak for this team of producers in this way, but we really believe in independent film. Like we're doing something that I think a lot of people wish their filmmaking experience was like. Even though it is gritty and it's guerrilla style and sometimes brings some really unprecedented challenges. I feel like we're getting to make movies the way that the movies that I loved growing up were made. And so that level of it, I think, really appeals to all of us. And that's something that even though obviously there are just like I said, obvious benefits of working with a major studio, this form of making artwork and being able to make it with people who are just simply passionate about it and aren't coming into it with a big profit motive or a lot of ego. There's just something really magical about that I think it would personally be hard for me to fully move away from. I think it would be hard for me to lose that spirit.
I love that. We miss, obviously, I guess when you think of like indie production companies nowadays, A24 seems to be the only one, really big one, there's all these,
Yeah.
and it's not the way indie films used to be, and so much has changed over the past few decades as far as that's concerned. But one of the appeals to Bampire that I like that I saw in your Indiegogo video was the shot on film or shot on video aspect of it, as far as VHS and and the handheld kind of footage at times. And it reminded me of, obviously, Blair Witch Project is a big deal, but like The Last Broadcast, which I think is a underrated horror flick from back in the day, which I think people should definitely check out. It came out before Blair Witch Project, I think, technically. But Malachi, as far as like influences are concerned, when you came to the table with this, like what sort of influenced you personally with this project?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll talk on my character in Bampire. I play a character named Branson, and he is, this guy who is really hip and thinks he's really cool, but he's like stuck in this small town and he hates it. I think he feels like really like he can't fit in at all. And so, like, as far as my character development, I felt really like akin to him in this sense of like, why doesn't anyone get me? Why can't I just express myself? And the way that comes out as like an aggressive young man is, it's like when you look at it in hindsight, you're like, of course nobody understood me. I was being an asshole the whole time. I really connected with that, and just I grew up in like rural areas of Oregon, and I was homeschooled, and my parents didn't know anything about like media or pop culture at
Wow.
all. And so I've
Okay.
had to like find all these things completely on my own. And uh I think that was the part that I just was really easy for me to connect with and kind of expand off of. And so when you watch the film, you'll see a lot of that. And I hope that you guys will see that underlying all of that like misplaced aggression, Branson really wants to be a part of like a new world that's a little bigger than the world he's stuck
So it's like
in.
Dawson Leary, basically. No, I'm kidding. Of course. Another 90s reference. I've got to get my mindset now. In our house, I've got a 9-year-old son, and we listen to a lot of 80s music, obviously. But every time the 90s come on, there was just a vibe about the 90s where it was like the 90s, like everything's cooler now, just like
and
this,
more extreme.
Yeah. So,
well, speaking of extreme, you guys have some extreme gore in Bampire. Now I know there's also some comedy, there's a little bit of drama and everything, but you're also still going for that style, that gore fest, that old school gore fest that we all love, and it kind of got neutered in the late 80s and then some of the early 90s, and it started making its resurgence in the 2000s, some of this extreme gore stuff. But talk about some of the effects, Taylor. Like how were you guys able to like really get the most out of your budget with the effects that you have, because the effects look amazing.
Well, thank you. We had the local practical effects artist Trista Kelly come down from Portland, which is one of the only people who didn't live in Eugene, and she is just a wizard with this stuff. I had worked with her briefly on another thing and saw what she could do, and it was all the stuff that I grew up watching on the DVD extras, where they're, making a mold of a hand so they can cut off the hand, and doing all the things and the buckets and buckets of blood with the spray thingy. And I didn't know how to do any of that. But I mean, very early on, we were like, it has to be practical. It has to be, it's the 90s. It has to be how they would do it in the 90s.
Yeah.
And, because of the VHS and the gore and some of the story beats and things, it does have like an 80s feel to it, even though it takes place in the 90s, just because of the type of movie. Because you're right, the gore was dialed back a bit in the 90s.
Right.
But that's not the 90s' fault. So this is like, what if, what if
you got everything you wanted from a horror movie in the 90s?
Yeah, what if you took all the best parts of the horror movies from the 80s and then put it in the 90s when it was extreme, right? That sort of thing. So that was really fun. And it was, I had done a tiny bit of that in short films and stuff, like fake blood cannons and things like that. But this was the first time really, really going for it. And that was like some of the happiest moments I can remember on set, is just standing there watching Trista do her work, and then rolling camera and just blood is dripping everywhere. And
you're sitting there smiling as blood is flying everywhere. You're like, this is the happiest moment of my life.
Exactly.
Zoe, was the amount of gore in the script too? Like, did you always envision this story being as gory as it is, or is that something that's kind of evolved with the movie itself?
It was built to be a gore fest. I definitely wanted to create a creature that could rip people limb from limb. I wanted dismemberments. I wanted some animalistic qualities to the amount of violence that was taking place. So very bestial in that way. So inevitably, right? You start to add quite a bit of gore and violence. But in general, like, one of the things that I think is maybe not true for every horror writer, but I think is important to consider as a horror writer, is what you need to put your audience through. So all of the stuff in our movie it's relevant. It's relevant to the plot. Even if it may seem like it's not, or something like that, in the moment, there's payoff. There's emotional payoff to the things that we're doing. And I think that's really important, because although violence is like very impactful, and that's in a lot of ways, sensory speaking, it's a high impact medium, right? When you bring violence into a home, into even just a TV screen, it has a notable effect on our body. And so I think that when you're playing in that kind of a genre, and you're creating what I'm literally referring to as a gore fest, that's where I think that the building of authentic characters to actually take and put through these scenarios is a lot of the times what I find actually missing from some of these like more bloody, horrifying movies. I like to care about somebody before they go into the wood chipper. I want to care, and say, no, anyone but them, and ideally you've got such a dynamic range of characters that someone will be able to feel that way about just about anyone that you put through the metaphor would chipper. So it was written to be very violent. Violence was heavily considered. And also, actually, like, there was something that I really learned that I'd like to share while making this project. And it actually came from Taylor because we were talking about relatability. And while, like, a lot of people wouldn't be able to understand what it feels like to have antlers break through your skull, right? You see that and you're like, oh my God, well, that's kind of crazy, but like, that's never going to happen to me, right? But what about something going through your hand?
Oof.
You know, like someone or in your family has stepped on a nail,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
that's something that suddenly I was going, oh shit, Taylor, that's fucked up. So I really feel like that actually I learned something, as a writer and as someone putting something into production and just working with this amazing team of creatives, because there are a million of these moments ultimately. Emily being one of my secret weapons, as I like to call her, because she's so incredible at so much of this behind the scenes stuff and planning. But that was like a really big moment for me when I realized that violence is also more effective, not when it's bigger, badder, more horrifying, more bloody, but when it's relatable. When you
Yeah,
can
and
feel
I think you see that in, if you just take, Friday the 13th slashers, I think, some of the characters that get killed off in the earlier movies are memorable because we cared about them. And then by the time they got to the latter films, there's just so many characters where like, this character's getting no backstory because they're just cannon fodder anyways. So I'm with you all. I like to actually care about the people that die. I don't really want there to be like just someone that's clearly cannon fodder because that also takes the excitement away from the film if you sort of know who all the people are that are going to die and everything. So I think that's a great move to really focus on characters first, even though they're going to go through some shit, but you still want to care about them.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for Malachi's character to live. I'm just saying right now, I want the angsty boy to live and see another day. Emily, were you able to get in front of the camera during the project?
Oh no. I am
No.
fully behind camera at all times. Yeah, I mean, I was the one on set with my laptop every day in the woods, like hotspotting my phone for Wi-Fi,
Right.
building call sheets for the next day, running around. But yeah, always behind camera.
It's got to be a trip, though. Sorry, Corey. It's got to be a trip, though, too, in this day and age, being able to do that. So, Taylor, when you think back to the way movies were made back in the 90s, guerrilla films or low budget indie films versus now, like the accessibility and the availability of things is so different. Even making a movie like The Last Blockbuster, which you did a little while back, versus now making movies. Can you talk about like, do you find has it gotten easier the more movies you're making?
No, it's much harder. It's much harder because there's no money. Indie films are dying and shriveling up, and so what you used to be able to make and sell for a few $100,000, maybe you can sell for 50 grand now.
Right.
But that's beside the point. When you're talking about like technology and things that do make things easier, they make some things easier, sure. We don't have to load film into the camera, right? So that's cheaper and easier than it used to be. But everything in front of the camera is the same. We still got to put the people there and do the thing and move the thing and get the props and whatever. And it sounds great. Emily had her laptop on set out in the woods and stuff, but as soon as you started talking about that, I'm thinking about how we didn't have cell phone signal out there. We didn't have Wi-Fi. We didn't have electricity in some of these places. And it very much felt exactly like we were making a movie in the 90s because if you needed to get a hold of somebody across set, you had to drive a car to them and ask them a question and then drive back because, we don't have enough money for walkie-talkies and cell phones don't work. We're in the middle of actual nowhere. And so, some of the things that, yes, some filmmakers do benefit from, you don't necessarily get if you're out in the woods, in the middle of, rural Oregon. So
I see Zoe as you're talking. Zoe's making these faces like, "Oh my God, this is so hard."
The trauma.
PTSD action.
Yeah.
And I want to bring it back really quickly to talking about the animation that you're using in the film, because I think that's really a cool aspect that isn't really done like the last movie I can think of besides Roger Rabbit, besides the Cool World and Evil Tunes that Corey brought up, was the segment in Twilight Zone the movie.
Oh, Cool World. Yep. Big fan
and
of
then
Cool World.
Taylor's holding up a VHS copy of Cool World. I love that. It's rare to see it used in a horror film in a fun way. Zoe, when you were writing this script, were you channeling other things besides Who Framed Roger Rabbit? By the way, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is very dark and it is very creepy. Yeah, were there other influences besides that movie?
And I just want to tack on, Zoe, sorry. Were you also like aware that like the cost, prohibition for having animation like this? Was this something you took into consideration? But we're like, I think we really need to do it though. Like, what was the thought process behind that as well?
So ultimately, the 2D animation solution was a group decision. That was something that we actually had to choose as almost like a pivot moment in our production. So to start, I should say that one of my other references when I was originally writing the screenplay was Monty Python and the Holy Grail, because I
Nice.
thought maybe we'll use like puppets. We'll do like the rabbit, right, and we'll throw it at someone and we'll like shake the camera and like everyone will scream, and it'll be what it is, but we're going to really lean into that. Then we really started like looking at how many puppets we would need, and I watched a few other films that had like some more intensive, more horror based, not necessarily puppets but constructions. And I started to realize that like you need multiple versions of these things, you need different expressions. Like in reality, puppets would have been a massive part of our budget. Like it would have actually eaten away a lot more of that pre-production budget, like money that we need to hire a cast, hire our crew, get our props,
Right.
get our costumes, like all of that money would have gone instead to puppets. And so we all were like, we can't do that. We even like at that point briefly considered using real animals, like going out and like trapping wasps and like going to a deer reserve and like
Wow.
filming real things, and that obviously like
Amazing.
presented its own handful of challenges. Specifically, it's also expensive and dangerous, in its own right. Trapping wasps, who would have thunk? So
Yeah, why not?
right. Can't see something wrong with that. So then actually, like after we had already cast our project, we had a lot of our locations lined up. We had known from the beginning that we were going to have this found footage element. So we'd really selectively picked our gimmicks at this point. And yet we still had quite a few things in the screenplay, like not just monsters and animals, but also like stunts. I mean, action sequences that we just really like we didn't know how we were going to achieve them. And none of these other solutions, puppets, real animals, they didn't help with any of that. If anything, they made it more complicated to try to capture what we really wanted to capture. So that's when we started talking about animating. And even though it was like tough, I think for all of us to start rewriting these things, to start like reimagining how we could use this new kind of medium and not have it be too much, not have it feel like it's just that band-aid that we're slapping on a gunshot wound. Slowly but surely, like I think all had moments individually where we were like, no, this could really work. Like this could actually not only really work, but be a callback to the fact that we're doing a Bambi vampire movie. Taylor ultimately had some amazing animators that he was like, hey, I have worked with these people before. I know these people. I can reach out to them. And we actually got on board Josh Stifter, who is just an amazing 2D animator, and he actually did Kevin Smith's movie Tusk with A24.
Oh,
And
Okay.
so once we had him like excited about the project and willing to do this like really gritty like style of animation that really like felt right to us, I think at that point we were just all in. And like whatever, it actually ended up being that one solution that provided us with all of the things that we needed to keep in the screenplay. So it was the solution where we didn't have to sacrifice anything, and we could not only do everything that we wanted, we could do it that much bigger. We could like not only have someone like ripped out the window of a moving truck, but we could actually have them ripped in half and have their like legs still in the truck, right?
Amazing.
Like, yeah, so it was definitely that solution that actually gave us more than we bargained for instead of having to sacrifice, large portions of what we all wanted to achieve.
Now,
It looks like
Malachi,
a-
did
oh,
you have to act against any animated co-host or co-actors?
Yeah, there is definitely one scene where I physically interact with the air. And that was a lot of fun. It's wild how like much we needed each other. It really takes a village. And there was a point when we first came up with the animation and I was like all for it. I was going so far as saying like, let's animate Greg Sestero's cameo. Like, let's animate whatever we need to, because it'll be all so much easier to schedule. And then, Taylor and Zoe really kept it grounded, and they were like, no, there's some of these gore moments, pretty much all of the gore moments need to be practical because that's what we love. And, the celebrity cameos need to be in person because we get to actually see these people's full performances. And then even like with Emily coming in to sort of like, to completely save the day with her like logistical, practical planning, talent. It was Taylor, Zoe, and I had production meetings that I think every single one of them went 4 hours plus because
wow.
we're just creative, chaotic minds who are willing to sit down and just, bang it out until we find the perfect solution. But, it's nice to have a bit of a pre-planned, what is it called, Emily, where you have a list of stuff you're going to talk about during the meeting?
An agenda.
Yeah.
I like how
was
Malachi's like,
necessary.
what's that thing called? An agenda. Yeah.
I've zero agenda. And
Well, I was,
and
I was
you
gonna
brought
say, I
up
did love the fact that I could see the look on Emily's face as Zoe was talking about all the pre-production problems. And so I could see the spreadsheets in her mind just going through them all. Like, yeah, that would have been a problem. That would have been a problem.
I will say too, Malachi, you mentioned Greg Sestero, which I think most people will know from The Room. However, he's done a lot of projects as well. I think I encourage people to check out some of the other stuff he's done, like Dude Bro, Party Massacre, I think was one of the movies he did. And also one of the gods of indie horror filmmaking, Lloyd Kaufman, obviously, who we're big fans of as well. And he's a trip. Because he still to this day will just go around and like he's the same Lloyd Kaufman he was 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
The fact that Toxic Avenger is over 40 years old, it still blows my mind. But you got fully funded on Indiegogo. What's the next step? Taylor, what is the next step for Bampire?
Well, we have some reshoots to do, and we're deep into the post-production process where editing and the animation is ongoing. And the fun fact about being fully funded on Indiegogo is that, we set that number at something that we thought we could achieve, but it's nowhere near what the movie costs.
Right.
So we are partially funded in the big picture of things. The Indiegogo is still ongoing. So if people like what we're talking about and want to kick us a few bucks or want to, pre-order and be the first to see this crazy half animated, partly VHS monstrosity based on a book that Disney also used, that is also a 90s horror movie, that is also live action, that is really fun and cool, then, kick us a few bucks on the Indiegogo. So it's like we still have some production to do. We're still actively fundraising to finish the movie. We're kind of like building the plane in midair as we go. And it's been that way the whole time. Pre-production, we're like, okay, we've scraped together just enough nickels to get through production.
Right.
And now we got to pay off this credit card, so we better do an Indiegogo. And now we've got this, and the animation's coming. And I'm like trying to edit the movie to keep up with the animator. I got to be just ahead because he's animating over the footage.
Right.
We're literally just like, oh man, we're building the track right in front of the train.
You're literally in front of the train as the train's moving and you're placing the tracks
Standing
down.
on the front of the train, laying down tracks.
And you're looking, you guys are looking at an October premiere in Eugene, right?
Sure. Why not? That sounds possible.
I tell you
Again,
what,
that's what's at the end of all these train tracks.
Yeah,
but,
that's the destination.
you
And,
know.
and just to let everybody know, listeners out there, we'll have all the links in the show notes of the episode. So if you like what you hear and you're digging, the idea behind this, then go check out their Indiegogo campaign. We already backed it. My wife and I we backed the premiere side, ticket thing. So hopefully we'll see you guys there and whatnot. But yeah, go back these guys. I mean, this is awesome. We got local horror, and even if you're not local to Eugene, and obviously a lot of our listeners are not, it's still nice to support indie horror and local indie horror. And like this, you guys, like I said, you guys are kind of building this foundation in Eugene for making movies in the future. And I hope that means more movies from you all. I hope that means more horror movies. I hope that means comedies and everything. But in general, I just love the fact that as someone who has a film background myself, I love the fact that Eugene is growing in this department.
When are we going to see your Eugene horror?
You got proof.
At this stage,
I'll start brainstorming with you guys.
Right. At this stage, we'll cover your press for the premiere in Eugene. So I'll fly up from Los Angeles to do it. It would be more than a pleasure. Yeah.
And actually, we'll do a full breakdown and review of the movie when we get the Blu-ray copies or whatever come out, and so we'll do another push then as well. But I mean, this is awesome. Like I love it. I'm so happy for you guys that this is happening and that you guys are getting funding and everything.
Thank you. I think I could speak for all of us when I say that this is the most insane thing that we've ever attempted, and it's really meaningful to have your guys' support.
What is it? Wayne Gretzky says, you miss the shots you never take, or whatever the hell that reference is. Who cares what that reference is? But you get it. Anyways, you're doing it. You're making it happen. You're in good company too, by the way, because there are a lot of people who want to make films, and thank God there's people out there that still want to support those movies. So for all the people that have supported your film and got you this far, you're getting closer and closer to the finish line. That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And yeah, like Corey said, you can continue to do that. And it is a jaunting task. So the fact that you guys took time away from your other parts of your lives to join us is a really, really honor to have you on our show to talk about Bampire.
Gosh. Thank you. You guys mean the world to us. And in the words of Admiral Adama, sometimes you got to roll a hard 6.
Dude,
that's what at you.
We came out here to do. We came out here knowing it was going to take that. And somehow, that's actually what happened. The whole universe was really on our side is how I have to think about it.
And by the way, Zoe's rocking a D&D hoodie, and as a D&D people, roll 20 for the rest of your life. Just roll 20.
Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and everything to come talk to us about Bampire. Everyone out there should also follow them on social media. I'll have the links to all their social media accounts in the show notes, as well as the Indiegogo campaign and the website and all that kind of stuff. So make sure you follow Bampire on Instagram and everything. And as always,
we'll catch you on the dark side.
Thank you for listening to Podcasting After Dark's exclusive interview series with the cast and crew of Bampire. And, as always, thank you for your support.